Hi, my name is Hazem Gaber, and now we're going to look at emergency response plan. You must have an emergency plan for each work site, and it's site specific. So you can't use a boilerplate emergency response plan for all of your work sites. And the emergency response plan is used in the hazard assessment, and it should have at least three of these things: procedures to evacuate the facility. It should make sure that there are adequate first aid workers on site and that all emergency equipment is properly located. Now, all people on the work site must be aware of the emergency response plan and they must know what their role is in an emergency. So, if you get hurt, you must report your illness to your employer. The employer makes a report and the employer keeps the report for 3 years, and then they must prevent the incident from ever happening again. Sometimes that's not possible, but this is a cycle where you have to take some corrective action. If if you see somebody got hurt, then you have to figure out why, and you have to figure out how to keep it from happening again. So, emergency response plan has 10 parts. How do we identify an emergency? How do we deal with the emergency? What equipment do we have? Where is it? How do we use it? And then the kind of training that we need for emergency workers. So this could vary depending on the site. So you know, if you're at a 7-Eleven, emergency is different. You could have somebody got hurt. You could have a gas leak. You could have a robbery. If you're at a power plant or a massive chemical plants sometimes big ones have their own paramedics and their own fire departments. So they have different their emergency plan might be like a phone book size, whereas your emergency plan might be 2 or 3 pages. So we should know where our emergency facilities are. They could be on site or they could be off site. So if we have to know where the nearest hospital is, um, we should know about fire protection. What kind of do we have? Fire extinguishers, fire hoses, sprinkler systems? Are there alarms and emergency communication, like two-way radios or a horn that tells us to evacuate, or an automated message? How do people know when there's an emergency? And then the location of a first aid kit or the first aid room or people who are trained in first aid. And then we should know the rescue and evacuation procedures, and then also the designated rescue and evacuation workers. So those workers should know their role. Now, every job site must have designated first aiders, and they must provide proof of training from an approved provider such as St. John's Ambulance, and they must renew their training when it expires. Now, we must also have transportation to take ill workers to a healthcare facility. So that could be as simple as calling them an ambulance. And there also, we must have adequate first aid supplies on site. The type of first aid supplies and the number of first aiders depends on how hazardous our work is, how long it takes to get from our work site to the hospital, and the number of workers on site. Now, every worker, however, has to know where their first aid equipment is and be able to access them during all work hours. So, if our site is a low hazard, and I'm not going to read these verbatim, but you can see the more workers we have, the more um, equipment we need, and also the further we are from a hospital, the more equipment we need. So if we're even for low hazard, if we've got 100 workers, say we need two first aiders Um, if we've got only if we've got less than 10 workers and the hospital is close by, we don't need to have anybody trained in first aid. We just need the kit. But we always need a kit. So yeah, there's there's different charts for different hazards of work.